and they don't know people in their own neighborhoods. They don't know who the people are that are teaching them. Even in our churches, there's a lack of community. Um, you know, in the life of a teenager, because I think what I loved about your book is talking about how it's important that teenagers aren't completely just thrown out there by themselves, but there is an interdependence.
Exactly.
Describe a little bit what you see going on in the culture right now and how that's affecting the emotional kind of interpersonal health of teenagers.
Well, it's a really great question, Mark. I think, there's so many things happening in the cultures so fast. So first of all, the speed of change is faster than ever before. And that's just not our impression. That's just the reality. Things are changing fast. The second thing is part of the technology that's evolved is allowing information, even like right now, you're in Texas, I'm in California, we're connecting face to face like this. I mean, it's amazing. I don't remember the exact time duration, but it's something like this, like in either 1 month or 1 week of life for an average person, we absorb the information that would have happened in a lifetime 200 years ago. Pieces of information that are streamed to us in all these different formats we have on tablets, on computers, on smartphones, and television, everything. We are being streamed information. So, those experiences in culture, the way energy and information is shared within society, absolutely shape your brain. I used to run a program at UCLA where we studied the way culture shapes the connections in the brain. So to get specific about it, I think the notion that some adolescents are spending huge amounts of time not face to face, even like we are right now, but just chatting and on social media without nonverbal signals, eye contact, facial expression, tone of voice, gestures, posture, timing, intensity of response. Those 7 nonverbal signals are actually crucial for parts of our brain, especially in the right side of the brain, to actually make a map of what's going on inside of another person's mental life. So I call that mindsight. So my concern is that the nature of the information being so text-based and what's called contingent, that is, you're just getting information, it's not responding to you really, except you press a button. We're losing out on these 7 nonverbal signals: eye contact, facial expression, tone of voice, gestures, posture, timing, intensity of response. You can practice those. So anything we can do in our culture, even through media, there's nothing bad about digital media, but if we can get digital media to start emphasizing the nonverbal, meaning not just language-based, that would be fantastic. That would be really good. That's one thing. The second thing is, people are feeling, as Sherry Turkle says, alone together. It's her book. It's a great book on the idea that even though we're connected in social media, we feel really isolated. And I think that's because the nonverbal is missing. That, you can send a chat and do all these other things, but it has the illusion that you're connected, but you're not in a deeper way connected to the moment-to-moment mental life that's unfolding. It's more what's called representational life. I'm going to say these things with words rather than just feel them in my inner experience, my see inside. So this second issue is really important because if you grow up in childhood and then enter adolescence where mindsight, sensing the mind of yourself for insight, others for empathy, and integration, that's what mindsight is. Insight, empathy, and integration is where I'm going to honor the differences between you and me, but then link with compassionate communication, that's integration. These fundamental components of mindsight may not be developed well in families and schools that emphasize just the external world we're in, the object world. There's an inner world of the mind, I call it the see inside, and mindsight is the word we can use to how you see the sight, the mind of self and other, the inner subjective life. So my worry is that the way culture is going is you can have a feedback loop where people are raised without mindsight experiences. They then create more, digital media and more technology that emphasizes a non-mind-sighted world. And soon we're going to have mind-sightless human beings that treat each other like objects rather than centers of meaning and emotion. And so, as you know, in the Brainstorm book, I give mind-sight skill training because I say, look, it's not just about the culture. We have evidence, and I say this in the book, we have evidence to show that people who have mindsight, who can reflect inwardly in self and others, they do better in life, in all aspects of life. They are healthier, they are happier, they live longer. Their relationships are more rewarding. Their different aspects of their physiology is improved, their immune system, their way they control gene expression, all sorts of things. So I think we're at a point to be really clear that mindsight is not an option. It's a birthright. But it is possible to raise kids in a culture within the family, within schools, and within a larger society that doesn't support it. And then you reinforce a world without it, and that would not be a good thing.
Well, and that's what I loved about Brainstorm, some of your other books, is that you actually give exercises for improving these things. And I know my daughter, because my son and daughter, 17 and 15 currently, they are kind of the first generation of teenagers that were coming into adolescence as the iPhone was being introduced.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of as they were, tweens and moving into middle school and high school. And my daughter lost her phone, accidentally threw it away, and she had to go several weeks without it. And it was like, literally, I could have run over a cat, and there probably would have been less emotion than losing this device, right? And she was sitting out on the patio with her friends, and I love that when they do that because, there you go, yeah, it's a good friend, isn't it? They were sitting out on the patio talking, and I love that because I can hear them talking through the window without snooping. And she said, "Do you think that we're better off with smartphones, or do you think we would have been better if they'd never been invented?" And one by one, the friends kind of went around and talked about that around the fire pit. And they all basically said that they think that they would have been better off without smartphone technology. But they all said they couldn't live without it. And my daughter's done a really powerful job articulating back to me what she thinks she's missing. And when I was reading Brainstorm, I was reading the Mindsight exercises like, wow, this is what she's talking about, that she doesn't feel she has the ability to engage. So anyway, I just want to encourage you with that. There's some great things in
That's good. Well, I would love to hear the details of what she articulated that is missing and how her friends all sort of came to the same conclusion. I'd love to actually hear that. It doesn't have to be right now, although I'd be happy to. But I'd love, if you ever want to send that to me, Mark, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, well, a lot of it, to be honest, was the nonverbal skills that you talked about. And that was a big component of it, was not knowing how to engage other people or read other people correctly. That was a big part of it.
Think about mindsight as a skill, and it's something you develop by practice, like any skill, but the practice is in the nonverbal world. So just sheer numbers, if you're spending all these thousands and thousands of hours in a medium, like on a screen, that doesn't involve the nonverbal, you're not going to really evoke much mindsight training in that experience. And so it isn't even like there's something wrong or bad about it. It's what that replaces. Mm-hmm. That's the big issue. What's missing, not so much about what's there. Now, obviously, you can misuse all sorts of things in social media and other forms. Like you can misuse anything. So it's really what it replaces. That's the sad thing. And the good news is, when we're aware of that, we can do something about it.
And you mentioned insight, empathy, and integration. And when you talk about integration, it seems like a lot of that just comes out in conversation with people as you're, kind of probing those things. I think that's what a lot of youth workers are doing, is just having conversations with teenagers about
exactly
what's going on in their life. And I think when we think about it, we think we're just talking, but what I got from your writing was this talking actually heals the brain. Is that correct?
Exactly. That's what I believe. That give and take allows you to feel connected. It's healing the brain. Healing comes from the word whole, and whole emerges from integration. So let's say I'm just sending out stuff on social media. Here I am now. Here I am now. I'm not really connecting to you. I'm sending things to you, but it's not this connection like this. It's more like that. It's like a one-way thing. Even though you get something back eventually, it's not in real time. And you think about it this way, Mark. It's like you have two people like this who are connecting in real time with nonverbal signals. Instead of just being two people communicating, they become a we. When you're just sending something to person A sends something to person B, B sends it to A sends it to B, it's really two people just lobbing stuff to each other. It's not people becoming like this. So this is the idea of mindsight, is that it's insight into yourself to know what's going on. It's empathy to understand what's going on inside of someone else. And then it's integration, literally meaning honoring differences, promoting linkages so you can become a we and a me, both. This is where the phrase comes from, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That's what integration means. Doesn't mean you give up a separate self. It means two selves, rather than just interacting with each other, two selves are participating to create a third experience, which is called we.
And, when we talk about empathy, thinking about teenagers as they're becoming, formal operations are coming online, this is really kind of one of the first times when they can really kind of put themselves into another person's.
Well, yeah, to various degrees. There's different, empathy is fascinating because you can just feel a person's feelings. That's one way of defining empathy. That's called emotional empathy. There's cognitive empathy, where you, more in the formal operations, talking about you think about what it would be like to be in their perspective. There's compassionate empathy, where you think, well, that's what they're going through. I want to help them. There's 7 or 8 different formal definitions of empathy. So, if we just embrace them all, the feeling is, and this is where mindsight is just a nice term, all of them, all 7 or 8 of them involve, I know you have a mind, I respect your mind, I want to connect with your mind, I have a mind too, I want to share my mind with you, so we resonate with each other. That's just the word empathy. We're using this broadest term. So there are some forms of empathy that happen, early in the first year of life. You can show that, infants that hear another infant crying, they get really upset. Or they sense someone laughing and they start laughing. I mean, there's this, empathic resonance is another way of using the word empathy, where your whole system just like joins with another person. And that's not with a higher, and I don't mean higher like I'm trying to give it a compliment, but I mean like higher, geographically higher parts of the brain are required, we think, to make the kind of complex calculations that allow us to think about another person's perspective. But early in life, even the first 5 years of life, you can have perspective taking. And there's all sorts of cool tests where you do that, like you say, Bill and Joe are in a room with Sarah, and Joe is going to leave the room, and before he leaves the room, he sees that they put the blue ball under the box, right? Under box A. The blue ball's under box A. And Joe goes to the bathroom, and Sarah and Bill decide to move the blue ball under box B. And then Joe comes back from the bathroom. And then the question is, where does he lift the box up to find the ball? That's called a theory of mind test. And, relatively young kids can do that. They say, well, it's under box A. That's where he's going to look. Or another kid might say, well, he's going to look under box B because that's where it is. And they're not perspective taking. They just remember, well, it's under B and he's a smart kid. He's going to go where it is. So to really realize that Joe, who went to the bathroom, will have in his memory system what he saw before he went to the bathroom, which was box A. When he comes back, he will look under box A, because that's where he last saw it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, someone else might outthink the whole thing and go, well, he'll look under box B because he'll assume these are really tricky friends of his who want to goof with, So you have to really understand, like why did he choose box B? Did he say I chose box B because that's where it is, or because I knew they were tricky friends? So, but that's an example where it's this is called perspective taking.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly, kids with autism have a real challenge with perspective taking.
Mm.
They will go to box B and they'll say he's going to look in box B because that's where it is. And they don't get that a person has a mind with memory, and that memory is based on perception, and perception is time dependent, and therefore a mind with memory and perception will then make a decision based on its memory system, based on its perception, that is under box A. That's a lot of what's called mentalization and what's called theory of mind, where I know there's a mind, so I have this theory that people have their behaviors governed by their mind. Therefore, Joe will look under box A. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does.
So,
yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
so this is where mindsight is really, for me, so fun because you can teach it. It helps people get healthier and happier, and the world will be a better place if we can have people have more mindsight. So everything I do basically is like saying, okay, what's the science of mindsight? What's the practical application of mindsight? How can our culture and families and schools promote more mindsight? And that's it in a nutshell. That's why there are all these mindsight exercises in the Brainstorm book.
Well, I want to thank you very much for your time today. I think your work is really helping us understand more of what we do. And for the people that are watching from the youth specialties community, just to make a connection, a lot of the things that Christ taught in Scripture, a lot of the principles of the church coming together, with a sense of acceptance, of love, of hearing one another's burdens and empathizing, weeping with those who weep, mourning, laughing with those who laugh. There's so many of the things in here that have scientific, roots to them. They're not just really, great practices in the church. And I think that was what was fascinating to me, coming in from more of a theological perspective, looking at your work and going, wow, there's a really interesting dialogue between these things. And it helped me see kind of where we in the religious community have fallen away from some of the power of the teaching and the relationship between the teaching and the science. So definitely recommend Brainstorm to everybody. I know several of you that tweeted in some questions for me have already gone out and bought it, and it's a great book. It'll challenge the way you think, and more importantly, it'll give you practical tools for engaging the minds of teenagers and helping them be everything that they are created to be. So I want to thank you again, Dr. Siegel, for your time today.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
A pleasure. Thanks for all the great work you do.
Absolutely.